Nigeria is Africa's most populated and wealthiest nation. The West African giant has a population of over 200 million inhabitants, and with a nominal GDP of $514.076 billion, the Nigerians are well and truly the big boys on the continent. But not long ago, the country was barely a shadow of its present greatness. Back then, it was South Africa making all the moves on the continent, and its industrial and infrastructural feats were unmatched by no one single African country. However, recently, the once almighty giant of Africa can only be described as slumbering, while Nigeria spurs on fearlessly and boldness of economic opulence. But Nigeria's true story of economic and industrial savviness only began a few decades ago. You see, back in the late 1960s, the main driver behind Nigeria's economy has been based almost primarily on the petroleum industry. A series of world oil price increases from the early 1970s spurred rapid economic growth in transportation, construction, manufacturing, and government services. In the late 1990s, the government began to privatize many state-run enterprises, especially in communications, power, and transportation, so as to further enhance the quality of service and reduce government dependency. But because the Nigerian economy is very heavily dependent on oil, it makes it vulnerable to constantly fluctuating oil prices. At the turn of the 21st century, Nigeria continued to face an unsteady revenue flow, which the government attempted to counter by borrowing from international sources, introducing various measures, or doing both at the same time. As a result, an ever-increasing share of the national budget was needed for debt repayment, with corruption dominating government operations, which meant that very little of Nigeria's income was being spent on the people and their needs. The country benefited from a 2005 debt relief plan by which the majority of its debt to a group of creditor countries known as the Paris Club would be forgiven once it had repaid a certain amount. Nigeria successfully met this condition in 2006, becoming the first African country to settle its debt with the group. Nigeria entered a recession in 2016, partly because of falling global oil prices, but saw progress with recovery within the next couple of years. So as you can see, Nigeria's economic success is heavily dependent on the vast oil reserves. And speaking of oil, we can absolutely not talk about oil in Nigeria without mentioning Aliko Dangote, Nigeria, and Africa's wealthiest man. The Dangote refinery is on track to become the 5th largest company in Africa. The Dangote refinery, under construction in Lekki, Lagos State, Nigeria, seems on course to be Africa's biggest oil refinery and the world's biggest single-train facility. Mr. Aliko Dangote is reported to have invested over $8.4 billion, which is just over 60% of his total net worth, estimated at $14 billion. The Dangote refinery is the largest in Africa, producing 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The production capacity of the Dangote refinery humbly exceeds big oil refineries like Saudi Aramco's Ras Tanura refinery, which is the country's largest refinery with a production capacity of 550,000 barrels per day. Dangote refinery will be ranked second in the UAE, coming in behind the Ruwais refinery, which belongs to Abu Dhabi Oil Refinery Company. In Iran, the Dangote refinery will be outperforming Abadan refinery, which has the largest capacity in the country with 450,000 barrels per day. If you are still watching this video, it means you love it. Just take out a second and hit that like button. This helps more people see our videos. Have you done that? Let's continue. The economy of Nigeria is a middle income and, with expanding manufacturing, financial, service, communications, technology, and entertainment sectors. It is ranked as the 27th largest economy on the planet and the 24th largest in terms of purchasing power parity. Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, as earlier mentioned. The country's re-emergent manufacturing sector became the largest on the continent in 2013, and it produces a large proportion of goods and services for the region of West Africa. In addition, the debt-to-GDP ratio was 16% as of 2019. Nigerian GDP at purchasing power parity has almost tripled from $170 billion in 2000 to $451 billion in 2012, though estimates of the size of the informal sector, which is not included in official figures, put the actual numbers closer to $630 billion. Subsequently, the GDP per capita doubled from $1,400 per person in 2000 to an estimated $2,800 per person in 2012. Again, with the inclusion of the informal sector, it is estimated that GDP per capita hovers around $3,900 per person. The country's population increased from 120 million in 2000 to 160 million in 2010. The GDP figures were to be revised upwards by as much as 80% when metrics were to be recalculated subsequent to the rebasing of its economy in April 2014. Although oil revenues contributed 2/3 of state revenues, oil only contributes about 9% to the GDP. Nigeria produces only about 2.7% of the world's oil supply. Although the petroleum sector is important, as government revenues still heavily rely on this sector, it remains a small part of the country's overall economy. The largely subsistence agricultural sector has not kept up with the country's rapid population growth. Nigeria was once a large net exporter of food, but currently imports some of its food products. Mechanization has led to a resurgence in the manufacturing and exporting of food products, and there was consequently a move towards food sufficiency. According to a Citigroup report published in February 2011, Nigeria would have the highest average GDP growth in the world between 2010 and 2050. Nigeria is one of 2 countries from Africa among the 11 global growth generators countries. In 2014, changed its economic analysis to account for fast-growing contributors to its GDP, such as telecommunications, banking, and its film industry. In 2005, Nigeria reached an agreement with the Paris Club of Lending Nations, as earlier mentioned, to eliminate all of its bilateral external debt. Under the agreement, the lenders will forgive most of the debt, and Nigeria will pay off the remainder with a portion of its energy revenues. Moreover, human capital is underdeveloped. Nigeria ranked 161 out of 189 countries in the United Nations Development Index in 2019. And non-energy related infrastructure is inadequate. From 2003 to 2007, Nigeria attempted to implement an economic reform program called the National Economic Empowerment Development Strategy, or NEEDS. The purpose of the NEEDS was to raise the country's standards of living through a variety of reforms, including macroeconomic stability, transparency, and accountability. The needs addressed basic deficiencies, such as the lack of fresh water for household use and irrigation, unreliable power supplies, decaying infrastructure, hindrance to private enterprise, and corruption. NEEDS was intended to create 7 million new jobs, diversify the economy, boost non-energy exports, increase industrial capacity utilization, and improve agricultural productivity. A related initiative on the state level is the State Economic Empowerment Development Strategy, or SEEDS. A longer-term economic development program is the United Nations-sponsored National Millennium Goals for Nigeria. Under the program, Nigeria is committed to achieving a wide range of ambitious objectives involving poverty reduction, education, gender equality, health, the environment, and international development cooperation. In an update released in 2004, The UN found that Nigeria was making progress toward achieving several goals, but was falling short on others. Specifically, Nigeria had advanced efforts to provide universal primary education and protect the environment. Requirements for achieving many of these worthwhile objectives is reducing endemic corruption, which obstruct development and stain Nigeria's business environment. President Olusegun Obasanjo's campaign against corruption, which includes the arrest of officials accused of misdeeds and recovering stolen funds, has won praise from the World Bank. In September 2005, Nigeria, with the assistance of the World Bank, began to recover $458 million of illicit funds that had been deposited in Swiss banks by the late military dictator Sani Abacha, who ruled Nigeria from 1993 to 1998. However, while broad-based progress has been slow, these efforts have begun to become visible in international surveys of corruption. Nigeria's ranking has consistently improved since 2001, ranking 147 out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2007 Corruption Perceptions Index. Nigeria's young and very dynamic population is another reason why the country is thriving. The country has a very young population, which are very eager to learn new things, especially in the fields of technology and engineering. When it comes to the biggest tech companies in Africa, Nigeria is leading. When it comes to fintech, Nigeria is leading. Even in blockchain technology, Nigeria is among the top countries involved. This has pushed majority of the youth to stop relying on the government and become very entrepreneurial. The government has also put in place initiatives to push more youths into entrepreneurship. When talking about Nigeria's economy, their entertainment industry cannot be left out. Nigeria's movie industry, Nollywood. Nollywood is actually bigger than Hollywood. Yes, you heard that right. Nollywood produces an average of 1,000 movies each year behind India's Bollywood. This has made Nigeria so popular and so reputable in almost every country. As a matter of fact, Nollywood is the second largest employer in the country after the government. Today, you can find Nollywood's movies in all popular streaming platforms such as Netflix and Amazon Prime. The music industry in Nigeria is one that cannot be left behind. The rise of cheap and faster internet has pushed Nigeria's music far and even beyond, especially as more social media platforms such as TikTok keep coming up everywhere. It has pushed the African culture through Nigeria, and all these help sell Nigeria and makes it what it is today. The entertainment industry in Nigeria is estimated to contribute over $1 billion to the country's GDP. The Nigerian economy suffers from an ongoing supply crisis in the power sector. Despite a rapidly growing economy, some of the world's largest deposits of coal, oil, and gas, and the country's status as Africa's largest oil producer, power supply difficulties are frequently experienced by residents. 2/3 of Nigerians expect living conditions to improve in the coming decades. So what indeed has made Nigeria so vastly wealthy cannot be tied down to oil wealth only. As you may have come to know, this is actually a myriad of other factors, not undermining the immense effect and dominance oils still has over the Nigerian economy, of course. I'd say Nigeria is doing pretty fine economically at the moment, with the country's GDP estimated to surpass $1 trillion in the coming years. Nigeria is on the verge of taking over from countries like Singapore and Indonesia in exceptional economic transformation and growth. A country no doubt with its own fair share troubles and vices, but one nonetheless to be underlooked. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and as always, please subscribe to our channel, as we look forward to bringing you only the most detailed, exquisite content about matters making the buzz on the continent. See you in another video, and thanks for watching.